Hey, what's going on? Coming back to y'all from my YouTube channel, True Greatness. Thank y'all for those who have saw my videos in the past, that look forward to my videos, and that will view my videos. Definitely subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. So today, coming back, last one I did was a movie review, some months ago, and uh, that's probably how this is going to flow, where it's going to be a little bit more space in between my videos than what it was in the past. But I'm not stopping. I'm definitely still doing them. Just wanted to let that be known. So I'm going to talk about the Sixers season. My oh my, what a season it was. You want to talk about storylines? You want to talk about some drama? You want to talk about some massive decisions? It's a lot. Now, some of the stuff I'm going to say, I didn't intentionally. I did not look up some of the stuff because I wanted to do this video raw, in a sense, without certain information. And some information hasn't come out yet. And one of those things are, and I'm going to talk about this, is the impending, should they not, max deal with James Harden in reference to the Sixers after the Sixers traded for him during the season. So I'm gonna come back to that, and I purposely didn't look that up because I wanted to discuss my opinions first of what I would do as a GM, or what I think the Sixers should do. So I'm gonna start from the beginning. Some overall impressions of this season. First and foremost, interesting, very interesting. The Sixers have now, and I know a lot of people in Philadelphia and commentators in general, especially Stephen A. Smith, does not like the word the process when it comes to the Sixers in the process. But since they've gotten back into the playoffs consistently, and that would have been around 2018, since they, well, 2017, 2018 season, since they've gotten back into the playoffs consistently, they have not gotten out of the second round. Last year, they were the number one seed in the East. We know the flame out that happened in the second round against the Atlanta Hawks in that series, and how the Sixers had a 3-1 lead, blew that, and then we all know what happened in Game 7. So I'm going to leave that there. And then there was the Kawhi Leonard famous shot in the 2018-2019 season, Game 7 in Toronto, where it spins around the basket, it looked like 100 times, and then it drops in. Toronto goes home with the win, obviously wins in Game 7, gets to the NBA Finals, and wins the NBA Finals in 6. So the Sixers have had some interesting history recently when it's come to not getting out the second round. And then in between that, one of those years they got dusted by, well, twice. They got dusted by Boston in the bubble season. They got swept by Boston in the first round. They didn't get the second round that year. But then the year before, the 2017-2018 season, they lost in 4-1. So they've had some interesting nail biter ones, and then some ones, where they just weren't the better team, obviously. And then some crazy, I don't like these words, crazy, excuse me. Some just thrilling situations, but not thrilling for them, with the Kawhi shot, and then obviously the flame out last year, or the collapse last year. And Atlanta, they did their part, and took advantage, and in the sense of, they didn't care who they were playing. They stepped up to the plate. So, say all that to say, we get into this season. First thing I'm gonna say is this: Embiid, the past 2 years, for the most part, has been the best condition he's been in his whole career to this point. Now, say all that to say this: in spite of that, he still has had though that injury at some point. In this case, in playoffs, two of them, which was the torn ligament in his thumb, and then obviously breaking his orbital bone. And then last year, like second half of the season, he was out for like 2 weeks because he sprained his, I don't know if it was MCL, ACL, one of those CLs in his knee. But then, then came back and finished out the year. But as part of my review for this season, he put together an MVP type season. Now, to me, and I had this conversation with someone else, the top three candidates to me were Joker. This is nicknamed the Denver Nuggets center, Jokic, Embiid, and then Giannis. In Joker or Jokic and Embiid at different points in the season, you can flip flop them. At points, Embiid was the top guy, and then it was Jokic. They were the most consistent throughout the regular season. There were points where at one point DeMar DeRozan for like a good month and a half span, and he had an overall really good season. Don't get me wrong, but as far as being a top three candidate, he had like a month and a half, 2 month span where he was arguably the top candidate. And then as far as MVP was concerned, kind of dropped. And still, if you look at his season, he still ended up being a top 10 MVP candidate. I don't know if he's top 5 by the voting by the end of the year, but he's definitely top 10, and closer to that top 5. But definitely by the end, it was those three: Giannis, Embiid, and Joker. And Joker and Embiid by the end of the season, that last like week and a half, really pulled away. So to me, Embiid put up those type of numbers, offensively, defensively, where you could really legitimately say he was an MVP candidate. And I said this to somebody before. Whether Joker won it or Embiid, you could have made a point for either one of them. And Joker ended up winning. Jokic ended up winning it, deservingly so. But that's the season that Embiid had. So that was the highlight of the year. That's definitely one of the highlights. The other highlight, no doubt, was Tyrese Maxey's development and how quickly he developed. And part of it, well, not even, I'm going to say part of it. All of it, as far as like how he was thrust into the starting lineup this year. He went from a rookie who's played, kind of in spurts here or there, like Doc had his rotation like that, and you would see flashes, to this year from the gate once the Ben Simmons situation happened. And go back and watch some other videos about the whole Ben Simmons saga, so I'm not going to go back into that. But once that happened, and Ben wasn't coming back, not even close to coming back, Maxey was the starter, and from the gate, you saw this kid, man, he had something. The speed, the fearlessness. Now, I will say this. This was the one thing, though, and this is where you could see the youth in him as well this season, that at times he's like, Maxey, what are you doing? Sometimes he deferred too much. Sometimes he deferred too much on Embiid, and when Sixers traded for James, deferred too much to James at times. But overall, man, averaged about 17 point something points per game. Yes, his assist wasn't necessarily high because he's not a true point guard. He's a scoring guard. But nonetheless, he averaged about 4 or 5 assists. He hustled his butt off. He had a couple 30 games. He had definitely big moments, in the playoffs. And then obviously in the regular season. So he was a definite highlight for the season. And you saw him becoming a better shooter. Now, there were times where you, as a fan, you're like, all right, Max, you've fallen a little too in love with that 3-point shot. Let's not forget what your bread and butter is, and that's your add-on. And his bread and butter is getting up and down that court, driving the lane, making some shots that you're like, man, this is reminiscent of AI. This is Ja Morant type of stuff. This is Derrick Rose in his prime, but Derrick Rose is a bigger guard than Maxey is. I go Tony Parker, so on and so forth, where just making those shots as quote unquote little guys in a sense, even though Derrick Rose isn't really he's a pretty big guard. But definitely Tony, definitely AI, definitely Ja. They're were and are smaller guards. So is Maxey, and to be going in there and just making these shots that you're like, wow. You saw that, and you saw the potential of that next step, and then being willing to be a legitimate decent 3-point shooter in his second year, but still not forgetting overall, from what I saw, that your main game is the drive, is the speed, is getting to the hole, and occasionally throwing in that teardrop. So those to me were the standouts. Now we're going to get to James Harden. We're going to get to the trade, and we're going to get to whether I think the Sixers should give him a max contract, or how that whole situation should work out now, if it hasn't already been decided. When the trade first happened, the one thing I knew, and I was quick to realize, the Sixers were not going to get the Houston James Harden. That just wasn't going to happen. But could you get something somewhat, like, could you get the medium of Houston James Harden in when engaged in Brooklyn James Harden as that playmaker? Could you kind of find where that medium ground would get? There was nowhere you're going to get the 30 plus, scorer as a whole, James Harden, which is Houston. That just wasn't going to happen. Given averaging 8 plus assists, so on and so, that wasn't going to happen. Those two things combined. But what I thought was a possibility was maybe you get, I don't know, 24, keep the 10 and 11 assists, somewhere around that 9 assists, kind of get that type of James Harden. A little bit more than what he did in Brooklyn scoring wise, but the playmaking that he was doing when he was in Brooklyn, when he was engaged and when he cared. And not to the complete height of what he was scoring in Houston, but like I said, a little bit more than what he was doing in Brooklyn. So I was like, all right, let's see what happens. The idea that I wasn't surprised that the Sixers gave up a good amount to get James Harden. Did I think they were going to sell the future for a while? In a sense, as far as draft picks are concerned, I wasn't completely surprised by that. But a little bit like, could the Sixers maybe not giving that much away? But you knew it was going to have to be some type of haul. So that didn't shock me. But I did like the fact that the Sixers did not have to give a Maxey or Thibault, because I thought as part of the trade they would have to give up one of them. I didn't think the Sixers were going to give up both of them, but I thought they was going to have to give up one of them, and that didn't happen. So I was like, all right. So overall, both teams, Brooklyn got what they wanted, a deeper team through that trade, getting back to being a deeper team through that trade, and not just so top heavy. And then the Sixers essentially seeing if they can get that star, that secondary star, to go with Joel and more of a scoring star like they had when we had Jimmy, when the Sixers had Jimmy for half of that season. But as we know, that's not at all what happened. You saw flashes. You saw flashes of James being what fans I thought he could be. But it wasn't consistent. And then the infamous, well, it will become infamous, sort of, Game 6 performance against Miami in this year's second round, where he shot 2 attempts in the second half. He went from, I think he had like 11 or 12 in the first half, to only 2, not 2 makes, 2 attempts in the second half. It just looked like he didn't care, or he was defeated. One of the two. Um, so it didn't obviously work out as planned. And then it goes to, should the Sixers give James Harden the max? The answer is no. Not even close. Not even close. Does that mean the Sixers shouldn't sign him back? No, no, no. I think the Sixers should work something else out to re-sign him, but not to the max. Because Thibault offensively played much better when James Harden got here because of James Harden's playmaking still. But in no way is James Harden at the level where he should be in a max contract, or in this case, it would basically be a super max. That's what it would look like. But do you still sign him to a good contract? Yes. Yes, indeed. But not to a max contract. Ideally, this is what I think the Sixers should do. I don't know if they're going to do this, but this is what I think they should do. You don't sign James to a max. You trade Tobias. Somewhere or another, you trade for Bradley Beal. I don't know how that's going to happen, but if you trade Tobias and then you got to package some other stuff, even if you got to bring another team in, potentially can happen. You let James just be the playmaker. You let Embiid and Bill be the scorers. You still have Maxey. Now, I know, obviously, rotation-wise, Maxey then wouldn't be the starter. So, would he regress? Or could he be that super scorer, six-man like Lou Williams was and still is? But definitely Lou at his height. Jamal Crawford. Jordan Clarkson has turned into that as that like dude that can come off the bench and drop 16 plus, like, and then in any given game could drop 30, like it's nothing. Could Tyrese be that coming off the bench if something like that was to happen? Hopefully. I mean, hopefully, if something was like that, if something like that, was to happen, then that's definitely a possibility. If he doesn't regress. So if he was to go back to coming off the bench, could he be that uber bench scorer? Like I say, he has the skills to do it, definitely. That's how I would suggest the Sixers to do it. That way, James doesn't have to have the pressure of being the second main guy. He can just be the playmaker. And I know that's what they did in Brooklyn with Kyrie, being that second main scorer, KD being the first main scorer, and then James being that third scorer, but even more so a playmaker, and the potential of what that offense could have been. But due to injuries and Kyrie's personality, which is an issue, it seems like I don't know the man personally, so I just say it seems like it didn't work out. But I think Bill, James, and Embiid, that could work out. Like I said, it would take some maneuvering. It would take some strategy. I mean, Bill would have to want to come. That's the other thing. Because I don't know if they have to trade for him or is he an unrestricted free agent. So whether they sign or have to trade one or two. So he would have to obviously, agree to it as well. James would have to be okay with not getting the max, but still getting a good deal. But we'll see. We'll see. So and then the other elephant in the room is Doc Rivers the answer as the coach to get the Sixers to that next level? The answer is I don't know. I think he's a good coach. I think he has shown that he can be a great coach. But there's also been some head scratching decisions, and I'm talking about just in his coaching in general. So I think he's going to have probably this year, unless Mike D'Antoni reneges out of his deal with the Hornets, because I think he signed with the Hornets as their new head coach. Unless he some way or another breaks that deal, then of course Daryl Morey would love to bring Mike D'Antoni to Philly. But assuming that doesn't happen, or assuming Mike D'Antoni doesn't have a coaching job somewhere else, a head coaching job that is, back at it that way, then I think they probably give Doc one more season, and then as long as nothing, out of control happens, and then if the Sixers then don't get past the second round, then I think he would be let go. But I think he at least gets one more season. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, this is it's been interesting season. So those are my ups. Those are my head scratchers. Those are my we shall see. Comments. What you think of the season? If you watch, if you're a basketball fan, if you are a particular Sixer fan, or if you just like basketball in general, what did you think of the season? In this case, in reference to the Sixers, rather a fan of the Sixers, particularly, or just a fan of basketball. What do you think? And just in general, what do you think of my other videos, and let me know. So thank you again for those who have seen my videos, who will see my other videos, and who want to see more of my videos. I appreciate the encouragement. Like I said, they're going to be spread out. They're not going to be as close together as they once were in the past. But I'm not stopping, and I'm going to continue to do them. For the time being, no doubt. So again, comment, view, share, and y'all have a good one. Bye bye.